The sky over Abeokuta was gray the day Ngozi stood outside her father's compound, clutching a torn Ganamusko bag. Her feet were dusty. Her face was calm, but inside, her world was in flames. Her wedding was just 2 days away, but everything had changed overnight. Earlier that morning, her parents had discovered that Kunal, the man she planned to marry, was just a public school teacher with no car, no land, and no inheritance. Her mother's voice still echoed in her ears. "You will not bring shame to this family. If you marry that man, forget us." Welcome to Moonlit Stories, where moonlight meets myth. Love timeless tales? Then hit like, subscribe, and join the circle. Every story begins with you. Ngozi didn't argue. She didn't cry. She just stood still as her mother spat near her feet and stormed back into the house. Her father didn't say a word, just turned his back. All she had now was Kunal's love and her courage. She walked slowly down the red, dusty path, past old neighbors who shook their heads in disbelief. In their eyes, she was a fool, throwing away her future for a poor man with no direction. But as the wind blew through her scarf, she felt something greater than fear: peace. She hadn't chosen Kunal because he was rich. She chose him because of the way he looked at her like she was enough, because his dreams didn't involve showing off, only growing together. That night, she arrived at Kunal's rented room in Ig Bubo with nothing but her bag and a soft smile. He opened the door, eyes wide, confused. "You came," he whispered. Ngozi stepped forward, placed her bag down, and said, "They said I lost everything, but I think I just found it." And that's how their new life began, not in gold, but in grit, not with applause, but with love. Their first night as husband and wife wasn't in a hotel or fancy suite. It was on a thin mattress, in a tiny face-me-a-face-you apartment in Ig Bubo. The room was cramped, with faded curtains and a single bulb that flickered when the fan came on. The zinc roof above them rattled each time the wind blew, but to Ngozi it felt like home. Kunal had spread their only wrapper over the bed. He brought out a bowl of cold EBA and a gussie, leftovers from earlier. They sat on the floor and ate in silence. No wedding cake, no music, just the hum of distant generators and the sound of two hearts choosing each other. When it began to rain, water dripped through 3 places on the roof. Kunal jumped up, grabbing bowls and buckets. One drop landed on Ngozi's forehead, and she burst into laughter. It wasn't mocking, it was free, pure. Kunal looked at her and smiled. "You're not regretting this already?" Ngozi shook her head. "No, if we have to move the bed every time it rains, then we'll move it together." Each evening, she would cook outside with firewood. Sometimes only boiled yam, sometimes just akara and pap. Kunal would sit beside her, scribbling poems in a small notebook. He'd read them aloud with a soft voice. "I don't have diamonds, but I have devotion. I don't own a mansion, but I'll build you a home of hope." They didn't have a fridge, or TV, or even a generator, but their room was filled with laughter and prayers. Neighbors gossiped, called her foolish, but Ngozi wasn't bothered. She would look into Kunal's tired eyes and see a future, not guaranteed, but grounded in love. And somehow that was enough. Weeks passed, then months. The rhythm of their small life became familiar. Wake early, fetch water, cook, work, dream. But one morning, Ngozi sat up in bed feeling dizzy. Her head spun, and her feet felt like lead. At first, she thought it was the heat. Then she realized she was late. She bought a 200 Nigerian Nairas test strip from a nearby chemist. Her hands shook as she waited. When the second line appeared, she dropped to her knees, stunned. Pregnant. She stared at the strip, her eyes filling with tears, not of fear, but of awe. She whispered, "Kunal." He was by her side in seconds. She handed him the test silently. Kunal looked down. Then, without a word, he grabbed her hand and pulled her outside. The sky was cloudy, the ground wet with last night's rain. Still barefoot, Kunal twirled her in the open yard, laughing, shouting, "We're having a baby. We're having a baby." The neighbors peeked through their windows again. This time they smiled. From that moment, everything changed. Their world, though still small, began to expand with hope. Kunnel took on 2 extra tutorial classes in nearby schools. He returned home late with sore feet and tired eyes, but always smiling. Ngozi started frying akra at a roadside junction near the motor park. She stood for hours in the sun, her belly growing and her feet swelling. Some commuters bought out of pity, others out of habit. Most didn't see her. But Ngozi kept whispering to her unborn child, "We may not have much now, but you're already loved." At night, Kunnel would massage her ankles with shea butter and sing his silly little poems. Their roof still leaked. Their mattress was still thin. But inside them, a new dream had begun to grow. And nothing could stop it now. Ngozi's pregnancy was harder than either of them expected. By the 6th month, her back ached constantly. She barely slept at night. The money from akra sales barely covered Gary and soap, let alone antenatal care. The closest hospital was a government clinic 2 towns away, and the nurse once told her coldly, "If you no get money, go born for house." Still, Ngozi pressed on. She sang to her unborn child while frying akra, balancing her belly against a wooden stall. Kunnel worked himself thin. Every evening, he returned with red eyes and aching legs, collapsing onto the mat with a soft kiss for her belly and a whisper, "We're almost there, my love. Just hold on." Then one night, the cramps came, sharp and fast. Ngozi screamed, and Kunnel rushed her to a small private hospital on a borrowed Okada. The journey was bumpy. She bled. She cried. But she held on. After hours of pain and pleading, their baby boy was born. Tiny, fragile, breath shallow. He didn't cry. The doctor frowned. The nurses moved quickly. The baby was rushed to an incubator chamber. Moments later, the doctor came out with news that nearly broke them. "Your son needs an incubator immediately. Without it, he won't survive. But it'll cost 150,000 Nigerian nairas." Ngozi looked up in disbelief. Kunnel asked, voice trembling, "Is there no help?" The doctor shook his head. Hospital policy. They had 6,300 Nigerian nairas total. Kunnel ran everywhere. He offered his phone, his borrowed TV, his shoes. Nobody listened. Ngozi sat by the glass window, staring at her baby. So small, so still, with tubes in his nose. She placed her hand on the glass and whispered, "Please don't leave me. We've come too far." And in that desperate silence, they waited for a miracle. The hospital hallway was cold. Ngozi and Kunnel sat side by side on a narrow bench, their hands clenched tightly together. Time moved slowly, like it was mocking them. The nurses passed without looking. The sound of the ticking wall clock was louder than their breathing. Their baby lay behind a glass partition, tiny still and fighting. Kunnel had stopped crying. Ngozi had stopped speaking. All they had left was silence and prayers. Then footsteps. A nurse came rushing down the corridor, holding a white slip of paper. "The bill has been paid," she exclaimed. Kunnel sat up. What did you say?" "The 150,000 Nigerian nairas. It's been paid in full. Your baby can use the incubator." Ngozi's legs gave way beneath her. She gripped the bench to steady herself. "How?" she asked, trembling. "Who?" The nurse pointed toward the cashier's office. Through a small glass panel, they saw him. A man, tall, calm, dressed in a simple but clean brown agbada. He handed a thick envelope to the cashier, nodded once, and turned to leave. Ngozi ran, calling out, "Please, wait." But by the time she reached the entrance, the man was gone. No car, no name, just the air, and a single envelope left with a note. "Some babies must live, and so must their mothers." She read it again and again, her tears soaking the paper. Kunnel joined her, eyes wide with disbelief. Neither of them understood what had just happened, but in that moment, none of it mattered. Their son had a chance. He had life. They walked back to the window. The nurse gently placed the baby in the incubator. For the first time since he was born, their son moved his tiny fingers. And Kunnel, voice cracking, whispered, "He's holding on." So would they. Days passed. The baby slowly grew stronger inside the incubator. His chest no longer rose and fell like a storm. His cries, once weak, now pierced the war like music. Every improvement felt like a sunrise. Ngozi sat by the glass each morning, whispering songs and prayers. Kano came straight from work each evening, eyes tired, but spirit renewed. They named him Chikamso, as God wills, because truly, only heaven could explain his survival. But even in joy, questions lingered. Who was the man in the brown agbada? Why did he help them? Was he a pastor? A politician? A ghost? There was no name, no address, only that note. Kano asked the nurses. No one knew. The hospital guards hadn't seen him leave. The CCTV had no footage. Power had gone out briefly that hour. It felt like something out of a storybook, yet life went on. Baby Chikamso was discharged after 3 weeks. Ngozi wrapped him in secondhand baby clothes gifted by a kind neighbor. She held him like a treasure chest, fragile, priceless, divine. Their return home was quiet. No fanfare, no welcome party. But inside their tiny room, a new chapter began. Ngozi stopped frying akra for a few weeks, choosing instead to rest and nurse the baby. Kano cut back one of his tutoring jobs to help out. They had little food, no diapers, no baby cot. But they had what mattered: love, health, and purpose. Sometimes at night, Ngozi would hold her baby tight and whisper, "You are proof that miracles still walk among us." And Kano would sit on the edge of the bed, watching them both, softly adding, "One day, the man who saved will know just how much he gave us." But little did they know, that day would come sooner than they ever imagined. By Chikamso's first birthday, the cracks in their zinc roof were still there, but so was their joy. The mattress remained thin, but their hearts were full. They decided to celebrate his survival with a small baby dedication ceremony. Nothing grand, just a way to thank God and remember how far they'd come. Neighbors brought plastic chairs. Ngozi borrowed a speaker. They made a big pot of jollof rice and zobo. Someone even volunteered a small white cap for Chikamso to wear. He looked like a little prince, unaware of how many battles had been fought just for him to breathe. A few days before the event, Kano did something unexpected. Quietly, without telling Ngozi, he wrote a letter. He addressed it to the hospital. In it, he explained everything: the baby, the debt, the stranger in brown agbada. And then he made a humble request. If the man who helped us ever returns, please let him know we're dedicating our son. Tell him he is welcome. We just want to say thank you in person. He didn't expect a reply. In fact, he never mentioned the letter to Ngozi. He didn't want to give her false hope. On the day of the dedication, their small compound buzzed with laughter. Kids ran around with oily fingers. Elderly women tied headscarves and hummed gospel songs. Kano wore his only native wear, an old white kaftan that had seen better days. Ngozi wore a simple lace gown sewn from leftover fabric. She had once been gifted by a customer. Just as Kano picked up the microphone to give his speech, a long black SUV slowly pulled up outside their gate. The music stopped. Conversations died. The door opened. Ngozi's heart skipped. It was him, the man in brown. Every eye in the compound turned toward the SUV. Children stopped mid-play. Mothers froze with spoons in hand. Even the borrowed speaker went silent, as if it understood the weight of the moment. Out stepped a man, dressed in the same calm, crisp brown agbada Ngozi had seen that night at the hospital. But now, in daylight, he seemed even more surreal. Graceful, tall, eyes filled with something deeper than wealth, pain and purpose. Ngozi clutched baby Chikamso to her chest. Her heart pounded. Kano stepped forward slowly, unsure if he was dreaming. The man looked at him and offered a small smile. "My name is Mr. Adewale," he said in a soft, even voice. "I came to see the boy who reminded me what it feels like to live." People whispered, "Is he the baby's grandfather? Is he a politician? Who is he?" But Ngozi knew. Tears welled up as she whispered, "It's him." Mr. Adewale's gaze shifted to the child in her arms. Chikamso reached out, grabbing the man's tie with his tiny fingers. The billionaire chuckled softly and knelt to meet the child's eyes. "You gave me something I didn't know I had lost," he said. Cunnel, voice shaky, finally found his words. "You saved our son. We never even knew your name. We thought we'd never see you again." Mr. Adewale nodded slowly. "I wasn't sure I would come, but something told me I needed to." He looked up at Ngozi and Cunnel, then down at the baby. His voice turned quiet, almost trembling. "I lost my wife and daughter 3 years ago. I had money, houses, connections, but I had no peace." He turned to Chikamso. That night at the hospital, he reminded me that even in suffering, there can be beauty. And just like that, the room full of plastic chairs became sacred. The moment was frozen in time. Neighbors who once gossiped about Ngozi's foolish choice now sat still, their eyes wide, hands covering mouths. Even the sun seemed to pause, casting a golden glow across the compound as Mr. Adewale stood and reached for the microphone. His voice was steady, but heavy with meaning. "1 year ago, I was driving toward the third mainland bridge. He began. I wasn't going there to think. I was going to end everything." Gasps swept through the crowd. A few people covered their chests. "I had lost my wife and daughter in a car accident. After that, I stopped living. I just wore the clothes, signed the papers, and stared at ceilings." He paused. His hands trembled slightly, but he continued. "That day, I don't know why, but I stopped by the hospital. I saw 2 young people, hands locked, crying over a baby fighting for life. You had no money, but you had faith. You had love. And in that moment, I remembered what it means to care." Ngozi was openly weeping. Cunnel stood by her, holding her hand as if afraid to let go. Mr. Adewale knelt and placed his hand gently on Chikamso's tiny foot. "Your son saved me before I saved him. That's the truth." Then, standing tall once more, he faced the crowd. "If you'll allow me, I'd like to help this family live better. Not as charity, but as gratitude. You reminded me that even the forgotten can be found again." The crowd was speechless, not from the gifts promised, but from the humility of the giver, not from the return of wealth, but from the quiet way grace had circled back. And so, the dedication became a beginning, not just for Chikamso, but for all of them. Mr. Adewale kept his promise. The very next morning, he returned, not with cameras or press, but with quiet action. First, he opened a trust fund for baby Chikamso, not just a token, but a long-term investment for his education and future. The document was neatly folded and handed to Cunnel in a brown envelope, the same color as the agbada he had worn. Ngozi clutched it like a treasure chest. She had never imagined her son would one day have more than just faith to lean on. He now had a foundation. Next came a store key, a fully stocked provision shop along the main road. Rice bags, canned goods, cooking oil, and shelves that stretched wall to wall. "No more akra frying under the sun," Mr. Adewale had said gently. "You deserve better." Ngozi collapsed into his arms, crying softly. "I don't even know how to thank you," she whispered. He smiled. "Just live well. That's thanks enough." For Cunnel, there was more. Adewale handed him a letter, an appointment to serve as director of a new foundation for underprivileged students. Cunnel read it 3 times, as if afraid it might vanish. After years of teaching children with no textbooks and salaries paid in halves, he was finally given a chance to multiply the impact of his quiet service. News of their transformation spread like wildfire. The same people who once called Ngozi foolish now queued to greet her at the store. But she didn't boast. She didn't change. She just smiled, grateful but grounded. Her phone buzzed days later. It was her mother. "We were just trying to protect you," she said. "You've always been special." Ngozi didn't respond with anger. She didn't even cry. Her heart had outgrown bitterness, because she had learned something greater. Real homes aren't inherited. They are built with love, with grit, with grace. And some stories, like hers, don't end at struggle. They rise into legacy. Life doesn't always reward the loud. Sometimes, it honors the quiet ones, the ones who keep showing up, who carry love on their backs and hope in their hands, even when the world turns them away. Ngozi never asked for wealth. She asked for strength. She got both, but not in the way she imagined. Her story isn't about a fairy tale ending. It's about grace wrapped in struggle, and miracles dressed in brown agbadas and quiet gestures. And Kunal, a man who once taught in classrooms with broken chalk, now writes new futures on polished desks, because someone believed in the weight of his silent service. As for Chikamso, the child who was almost never born, now he grows with a name that means God has said yes. And that's what this story is, a resounding yes to kindness, to second chances, to rising above where you started. If this story touched you, remember this. Sometimes, all it takes is one act of compassion to rewrite a family's destiny. One stranger, one choice, one moment. So, build your legacy. Not in noise, not in gold, but in love, grit, and grace. Because the forgotten can rise again. And the smallest stories can echo the loudest. Fade out with text on screen. Based on true strength, inspired by quiet miracles,